TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. This is the show about the news nobody admits is happening and would prefer does not exist. And they accomplish that by ignoring it entirely, but it is not ignored here. We are here with the great David Wood, one of the world's leading Christian apologists and critics of Islam. And I am Robert Spencer, author of the Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, this is This Week in Jihad, your award-winning show about the phenomenon that does not exist. Now, David, we have quite a few jihad stories this week, and I thought we would start off with some open warnings. One of the funny things about jihad is that the jihadis constantly tell us what they're going to do. And then we constantly say, nah, you're not really going to do that. None of that's really going to happen. And there's quite a lot of that this week. So let's go to Turkey, or Turkiye, as they prefer to call themselves, so you will not confuse the nation with the Thanksgiving bird. And in Turkiye, it's a very interesting thing happened. The president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he said to a crowd just the other day, "Are we ready for the attack of 2023? Now, I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like he's talking about attacking Greece in 2023. And his lieutenant, one of the members of his ruling coalition, Devlet Bahçeli, he said the blue homeland, which is a new one on me. I figure the blue homeland has got to be Greece, because they have the blue and white flag. And the blue homeland, like the Zionist entity, is the stolen and inhabited geography of the Turkish nation. No one in this world will support the offender, the blue homeland. Of course, the truth will find its place at the end of the day. It's just a matter of time. We know and believe that despair comes from the devil and hope from Allah. So the blue homeland, Greece, is on stolen land. Where have we heard this before?
Several places, but I have to back up here for a second, Robert,
Yes, sir.
because you refer to him announcing, attack of 2023, but after years of understanding, learning how to properly interpret Muslim texts, Muslim sacred texts, we can also interpret the words of people like Erdogan. So, I mean, how do you know he's not talking about attacking with love?
The love bombs of 2023.
Yeah, hugs. They even call them love bombs, right? So
Yeah.
you're kind of attacking, but with love. And so I had to point that out, Robert.
It's a religion of peace. So stolen land, I thought, that's extraordinary, because that's the same rhetoric that is constantly used against Israel. It's also lesser known, but it is used in Spain. Correct. So the premise is that any land that belonged to Islam at any point belongs by right to Islam forever. And this in turn is based on chapter 2, verse 191 of the Quran. Very simply, drive them out from where they drove you out. If you were there and you got driven out, you have a responsibility before Allah to fight back and take it back.
And notice if they were actually consistent with this principle, right? We should be shouting for Mecca to be returned to pagans, right? We should be shouting for very large portions of the Middle East to be returned to Christians or to those who came before Christians. But it is strange that there's this one religion where if you controlled something, a certain number, it could be decades, could be centuries ago or whatever, it somehow still belongs to them. And what's interesting is they don't forget. They don't ever forget, right? Again, it could be centuries. But notice, I mean, if they were consistent, then, we should be screaming to retake Constantinople right now. But it's just amazing that an ideology, a religion that fought its way out of Arabia, conquering through the Middle East, across northern Africa, up into Europe and Spain, and then eastward through Iran and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and into India, is the same ideology and religion that says, hey, if you control something at some point, the people who have it need to give it back. It's like, do you hear what you're saying here? I mean, do you have any clue what you're saying?
I think this is a group that has a marvelous lack of self-awareness. And
it's the exact same principle that we see with freedom of speech. Hey, we get to mock your religions. We get to Muhammad walked around the Kaaba stabbing their idols with a stick, and you find out today it's wrong and immoral to insult another person's religion and religious beliefs. Like, wait a minute, it didn't bother you for 14 centuries while you guys were the ones who were doing it. Suddenly you're on the receiving end and it's wrong and immoral. And it's just, there's no concept of consistency. It's, we're supposed to be on top. We're supposed to control everything and dominate the rest of you while you all act as our dhimmis. And we're going to keep fighting you until we get our way.
That's exactly it. And the another adding to the irony is this comment here: Turkey is stolen land from the Greeks, if anything, and that's absolutely true. If anybody's got on stolen land, it's Turkey. Every bit of Turkish territory was part of the Byzantine Empire that they conquered. Greeks were living there for centuries, from time immemorial. You're talking about going back to Homer, and you have Greeks there, and there's not a Turk in sight. That's the stolen land.
Yeah, the original philosophers were considered Greek philosophers, but they're actually in Turkey.
They were Muslims.
People like Thales and so on. But hey, I'm unlike some of our jihadi friends. I'm actually fair and balanced. So I say, let's carve up Turkey and give a good portion to Greece. Give a good portion to Greece and a good portion to.
I'm all for carving up Turkey. Yes, give Constantinople back to the Greeks. And all of the West, at least the western part of Asia Minor as well, where my own family is from. And I'll get a little villa in Chesme, where my grandparents are from, and I'll have you over for ouzo. Anyway.
Yeah. No. I know my ouzo from when I was a teenager, and I found out there was no drinking rules over there.
Oh, yikes. But there's no right of return for me, or for anybody who is anybody who's the child of people who were exiled or who escaped from Islamic lands.
And I just wanted to say for everyone who's watching, we talk about these things and we point out the hypocrisy and we're joking and so on. We're pointing this out for a reason. We're pointing this out because you should be pointing this out. All of you who are watching. When you hear that Israel needs to be returned to Muslim control and eventually Spain, or you hear something about Greece and complaining about the lands taken from them and so on, it should immediately be, whoa, what are you saying here? Are you saying that if one group originally controlled a piece of land and then it was subsequently controlled by another group, that later group needs to return it to the earlier group? Because we got some issues to talk about then.
Indeed. All right, let's go to Australia. And a former researcher at the University of Western Australia, a charming individual named Abdussalam Adinazada. And Abdussalam Adinazada has just been jailed for 3.5 years for advocating terrorism via YouTube videos. And I thought, wait a minute, what do you bet that his videos never got flagged by YouTube? I don't know, but I would bet. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's a safe bet. I mean, Ali Dawah actually openly calling for the public executions of the ex-Muslim community. This was actually, I've never reported anyone in my life, but there was a campaign on Twitter to report Ali Dawah. it went to Team YouTube, and Team YouTube on Twitter responded, and they said something like, "Hey, we're not going to stand in the way of open debate on religious issues." Like, wait, we say one word about that religion, you start taking our stuff down. He's actively calling for the public executions of millions of people, and hey, this is just debate, and that's Ali Dawi. You got Sheikh Asim Al Hakim, and he told his followers that even though they're not strong enough to wage offensive jihad now, they need to be planning for 40 or 50 years from now, when they will eventually be able to go door to door, giving people the option of converting, paying the jizya, or being executed right there. And he's fine. That, as far as YouTube is concerned, that video is gold.
Well, yeah, this guy actually continued to post videos until he was arrested. So there's no indication, at least in this story from Australian broadcasting company, that Abdusalam Adina Zada got in any trouble with YouTube. Meanwhile, he's saying bloodshed is coming, and he was inviting it. He says work should start, jihad should start, mujahideen should advance, we must not be afraid of death. So he says bloodshed is coming, and then here again, Western authorities say, oh, you're so cute, bloodshed's not coming. But they did take action. They did. This guy is in prison now, at least for a while.
And but he hasn't done anything terribly big, which means he will eventually be released after spending several years conspiring with his fellow Muslims and forming an elite little group.
Indeed.
Brilliant. Oh, by the way, Christian Hijab here says her video of Hatun getting arrested for her Quran getting stolen got banned by TikTok for violence. Imagine that.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
This woman got arrested for her Quran being stolen, and then TikTok says, you can't say that on here. Banned. These guys are
incredible.
Nuts,
incredible.
They're nuts.
All right, so back to Turkey. In Turkey, where we have Erdogan saying there's going to be war next year, and that Greece is on stolen Turkish land. This is what you read in a Turkish textbook. This is going to school, 12th grade textbook, Fundamentals of Religious Knowledge, Islam 2. One of the most important forms of worship in our religion is jihad. Based on its root, the word jihad means working, growing tired, and expending effort by word and action using all one's strength. So far, this sounds like the average Western apologetic form of jihad. It's taking the kids to school. All actions, including war, done to exalt the name of Allah, are included in this concept. And that when they use the meaning of war, the scholars, they are in consensus on the idea, under normal circumstances, it is fard kifaya, incumbent upon the community, and in times of general mobilization, it is a form of worship that is fard ayn, incumbent upon the individual, that all Muslims must carry out. So this is essentially saying that under some circumstances, all Muslims must engage in jihad as warfare, and that is an obligation in Islam. And meanwhile, the president of this country is talking about going to war with the neighboring country, saying it's on stolen land. Then, yes?
Oh, I just wanted to say, thinking about what the justification for something like that would be. But Muhammad said in the hadith, if anyone meets Allah without wounds on his body from fighting the unbelievers, he meets him with a deficiency. In other words, think about that. That's a message to all Muslims over the world. If you stand before Allah and you do not have visible wounds on your body for fighting the unbelievers, Muhammad says you're an incomplete Muslim.
Yep. And so, meanwhile, also in Turkey, Gülsen Bayraktar Kolakolu, a pop singer, and she was arrested for saying that the Turkish religious schools, the Imam Hotep schools, they are encouraging perversion, she said. And I think, well, if she's talking about armed warfare against people because they don't believe in the same religion, she's got a point. But she was arrested.
Yeah, even if you're talking about perversion in a straightforward sense of molesting children and stuff like that, they're still it would still be accurate.
Indeed. In another indication where Muslims are being entirely clear about their plans and intentions, there's a video, I have it at Jihad Watch, of a boatload of Muslim migrants, and they are landing in Italy. And they've been on the open seas, crossing over from Tunisia or Libya or wherever. And as they get closer in the Mediterranean to Italy, they start to scream out a certain phrase. What do you think they were screaming, David?
Hang on, I'm gonna have to phone a friend. Hello, Professor Genius at the University of Logic. What were they? What do you think they were shouting? He says go with Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Now that's an unusual idea. I think that's actually true. They were screaming Allahu Akbar as they arrived in Italy. And so you got to wonder, because people don't realize the translation of Allahu Akbar that we constantly get in the Western press is God is great. Allahu Akbar does not mean God is great. Kabir is great. Akbar is greater. Allahu Akbar is Allah is greater. The implication being greater than your God. So here you have a boatload of young men, no women, young military-age men, all coming to Italy, all Muslims, and they are all shouting Allahu Akbar as they come to this land that is ruled by infidels. What could possibly be the implications of such a cry in that context?
Again, love bombs. We've
Yes.
been through this, Robert. We've been through this.
Indeed. Did we talk yesterday? Yesterday. Did we talk last? Oh, by the way, yesterday I did speak with Sam Shamoon, and he sends you his greetings, and with all the tartness that you might expect.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it was good to see him. But in any case, did we talk last week about this story from Denmark about the Muslims taunting the native Dane? I actually don't think we did. And he's saying, we have 7 or 8 children, and you Danes have 1, if that. And pretty soon you're going to be exterminated, and there are not going to be any more Danes. And of course, he's taunting him, and this went around to a tremendous degree with people saying, gee, this guy's being rude. But it's much more than that, because what he is saying is actually just a simple statement of fact, that he is engaging in a demographic jihad, and that he expects that it's going to be successful soon. Like Ouare Boumediene, the former president of Algeria, said back in the UN in 1974, we will conquer Europe by the wombs of our women. And this is what this guy was saying in Denmark.
Never underestimate the power of having babies.
Yep.
Oh, a little side note. Years ago, so I forget what year this was. I don't know if this was 2012 or something like that. I was on a trip to Ethiopia. So the plane went from the U.S. to Germany first, and then from Germany down to Ethiopia. And during the layover in Germany, I'm sitting in the area that's flying to Ethiopia, and there was a delegation from the U.S., right? There's a delegation of U.S. women who were being sent to Ethiopia and the surrounding countries to encourage women and explain to them why they should have fewer children and just stop at 1. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, if you were unimaginably successful in sharing that message, like they actually paid attention, you actually got people in Africa to pay attention to what some people, delegation of women from the United States was telling them to do with their wombs. Should be, hey, their body, their choice. I don't know, but anyway, but these women were going down there. I'm sitting there, I couldn't help but hearing their stupid ideas about all the things they were going to share. But I'm sitting there thinking, there is precisely one group that would never listen to these ladies, ever. And so imagine if you were actually successful. You got like they were just completely successful when they went down there, and they convinced all the Christians and other groups except Muslims, guys, only have one child. Meanwhile, 10, 12, 14 kids coming up from the other religion. You're basically saying, hey, speed up this process of the demographics.
We're handing you the future.
Yeah. How do you not? I mean, how do you not see how insane you are when you're spouting this nonsense?
Well, they have already convinced practically all of the Western world, and they have handed the future. It was Bernard Lewis, the historian, said it 20 years ago. Europe will be Islamic by the end of this century. And, I haven't seen anything to show him wrong yet. But on the other hand, there is the massive crisis of apostasy. The story ain't over.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking the avalanche, right? So,
yes.
See, you can't, when you're sitting there calculating your demographics, an avalanche is a natural disaster, right? You're not expecting it, right? You can't factor that in, right? It's like someone sprinting. It's like, hey, who's the fastest runner? Who's the fastest sprinter here? Well, you're not calculating like the guy, his leg breaks or something like that, just from taking, his leg just snaps or something like that. You're not calculating those kinds of things. And I'm interested in this avalanche.
Indeed. Meanwhile, also in line with the idea that they are telegraphing what their intentions are and making no secret of what they're really doing, this is a bit tangential to that, but related. In the past week or so, there have been 3 imams arrested in India for recruiting for Al-Qaeda. And usually, we think an imam is somebody who has dedicated his life to understanding Islam properly and communicating it effectively. If it's the religion of peace, we're always told they should be the last people to ever get involved with terrorist groups. And yet there have been 3 arrested in this week alone in India.
One quick question here. Bella says, "Do Muslims allow abortion?" Bella, that you will get some different comments from different people, but
I got a story about that this week, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that according to Muhammad, I think it's after 4 months, that's when the soul enters the body, and so a lot of Muslims who would defend abortion would say that up until 4 months, it doesn't even have a human soul. So.
Right. It's kind of a shame to me because I used to move in a lot of Catholic circles, of course, and many people I encountered, especially among Catholics, would say that Muslims are our natural allies in fighting back against ruthless, secularist, pro-abortion forces because they are all pro-life. And actually, Islam is not pro-life and never has been. And so this is a misconception on the part of these Catholic groups. But
wait, the guys who are running around saying we love death more than you love life are not pro-life?
Oddly enough. I don't know how these people get these ideas. But the capacity of human beings for wishful thinking is apparently endless. Related story. We'll go to kinetic jihad activity. Actually, this is my women's section. We're all organized now, David, and I've got these various sections. We started off with the section about how they're telling us exactly what's going on and what they're going to do. And now we'll segue neatly on the basis of the abortion issue to the women's section. And there's a terrible story out of Lebanon. Hana Mohammed Kodor was pregnant, and she was badly beaten and set on fire by her husband because she refused his order to get an abortion. I think that neatly encapsulates what we're discussing here about Islam being pro-abortion, and also introduces to us this week the recurring theme of the subservience of women in Islam and their vulnerability, I should say, to physical punishment if they get out of line. I guess there's nothing else to say about that. Let us go.
I'm just when the story is especially dark, I start sometimes I don't realize that what I'm saying comes across as joking,
Yes.
and then it's, hey, guys, I'm a diagnosed psychopath, right? I mean, I don't always understand. So I try to, sometimes I just, no, shut up, keep your mouth shut right now. Just keep your mouth shut for 30 seconds.
Yeah, we don't. We have to, of course, always be careful not to give the impression that we are laughing at the misfortunes and tragedies that we are discussing. At the same time, it's important to try to keep good humor amid all this terrible news, or you'll go mad. So, in any case, a terrible story out of Lebanon, and there are many others. Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna. I mean, I always think, because you can have a husband who's just a hothead, and you could have that from any background. Could be an atheist, could be a Christian, and someone just flips out. My wife didn't listen to me. I'll kill her. But there, as you often point out, there's a religion that actually encourages that, right? That encourages the violent reaction, right? Most other groups in the world say, yes, guys, you may have, you may want to just flip out. Life, you need to control that. You need self control, and not get physically violent with your wife. And there's a religion out there that says no, it's actually good, and it's okay with Allah and His messenger. And as much as we hear, oh, it just meant tap them lightly with a toothbrush. That's all it meant by beat them in the Quran. But you read the hadith and you see, an example of a woman who was beaten by her husband until her skin turned green, and it was totally fine with Muhammad. And so if you're able as a man to just flip out like that and beat a woman till her skin turns green and so on, or in the case of in the context of blasphemy, you could even just brutally murder a woman for insulting Muhammad. Where's the line of, hey, I'm telling my wife what to do, and she's completely disobedient, and she's not listening to me, and she's about to mess up my life. What do you do? It seems pretty easy to rationalize in Islam.
Where's the line is the key question there. Because even if you believe the business about the toothbrush, actually somebody was saying to me the other day that they bought a miswak, an Islamic toothbrush, and thought, well, this is not really a good apologetic point, because you could do some damage with this thing. And I thought, yeah, actually, it doesn't really take, you don't have to have some big club to harm someone, unfortunately. And so a culture of violence is created by the justification for the beating of women who are disobedient. And then it's the line that's drawn is entirely subjective. Some guy might have his wife with her skin green from bruises, and he says, well, I beat her lightly. It was lightly as far as he was concerned.
Yeah, I have to say, in the Muslim sources, the distinction between a light beating and a heavy beating was, one was doing permanent damage, like breaking bones and leaving gashes and stuff like that. Whereas the light beating doesn't mean, hey, I tapped you with my toothbrush or something like that. It's just bruising. It's bruising, but it's not. You're not permanently. You're not getting bones broken or something like that. And so, and I mean, just think about the logic of the Quran. Strange phrase, but think about the logic of it. Right? It's, hey, as for those from whom you fear rebellion or whatever, however that gets translated, it's warn them. Then that's not working. Then you escalate from a mere warning, and then you escalate to banishing them to a separate bed. So you separate from them. And there was one, I read one commentary where it was like, that means you tie them down in the bed, right? It's like, it's not just like going to a separate bed.
Oh my goodness.
And then if that's not working, so you've separated from your wife, now you're going to escalate even more, so she understands the severity. And so now beat her. And what's that mean? Oh, it means tap her with the toothbrush. Wait a minute, how's that an escalation over the warning and the separating from her? And now the final step to show her you really mean business. Here's my dental association approved toothbrush. Tap you with it. We're good.
Okay, so another terrible story in a similar vein.
Hold on, hold on. I got to make a. I just want this on record because I have to make this commercial at some
Yes,
point.
sir.
Uh, Oral B, the toothbrush more wife beaters use. Have a guy beating his wife with the Oral B.
4 out of 5 wife beaters endorse.
Guys,
Yes.
I'm totally gonna forget I ever came up with this awesome idea 2 minutes from now. So someone like 2 months from now remind me of that because I want to make that video.
All right, Ankita Kumari, terrible story in India. This is a man named Shahrukh Hussain who lived next door to her, constantly trying to date her, trying to get her to get into a relationship with him. She continually rejected him. Finally, he set her on fire, and she died with burns over 90% of her body. And then, just to add insult to injury, India Today, one of the most prominent papers in the country, actually gave his name as a Hindu name when they were reporting on the incident. They are so afraid to talk about jihad and violence that comes from, that is justified by the Islamic texts, that they actually covered up the specifics here. But this was a Muslim, Shahrukh Hussain, who set Ankita Kumari on fire and killed her. Another terrible story in a similar vein, out of Pakistan. Another Hindu, an 8-year-old girl, victimized, gang raped, and then they stabbed her in both eyes, apparently so that she would not be able to identify the perpetrators. But these things ultimately are all justified by the permission the Quran gives for the sexual use of infidel women, and by the permission the Quran gives to do violence to women from whom one perceives disobedience. No, yes, sir.
As earlier I was mentioning that, when we're pointing out the hypocrisy and so on, the people need to be pointing that out pretty regularly, wherever they happen to be on social media, when they see Muslim leaders talking about lands taken from them or something like that, or Israel or something like that. It should be immediately brought up. What about Mecca, which Muslims took from the polytheists? What about Constantinople? What about almost every place that Islam spread when it took over? But on these kinds of issues as well, for those of you who are watching, you should hear stories like the ones that Robert is sharing. And that should produce some righteous indignation and anger in you. Then what do you do with that? Well, I suggest taking it out on the prophet and the book, right? Go after you use that anger and use it to expose that fake prophet and that ridiculous book, right? Hey, this is what this is producing. I need to learn some things about this book and this false prophet, and I need to share them. And guys, that at the end of the day, that's all it takes. If everyone who's watching just learns one or two really important things about Muhammad, and then goes out and shares them with someone, and then those people then share them, pretty soon those things become common knowledge, and that's ball game. Then it's the avalanche is in full effect.
Indeed. Out of Germany, same story. A Muslim had disputes with his wife, and in front of their 5 children, ages 1 to 11, he killed her, stabbing her 30 times because she wanted to live in a Western manner.
Notice there, right? Like, again, I pointed this out earlier. You could have a guy from any religion just flip out, and he could just be a hothead. He could have problems and so on. So any guy could be a total scumbag and get just go off and kill his wife and stuff like that. But it seems to be much more prevalent among adherents of the religion that encourages violence against women. And it's just a guess on my part, but I don't think that's a coincidence.
Indeed. Well, it should be emphasized. It's not just that it's in the Quran. and so it's okay. Being in the Quran makes it a sacred act. It being in the Quran means that you are performing an act of obedience to Allah when you beat a woman from whom you fear disobedience. So it's not just by way of concession. It becomes almost sacramental. It becomes something that is a holy thing to do. It's like if a Christian loves his enemy and turns the other cheek. It's the same thing, because this is the command of the supreme God.
Yeah, notice the language in the Quran. It's not as for those from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them, banish them to beds apart, and try to control yourself. It doesn't say that, right? Hey, you fear rebellion for that woman, then escalate until she no longer gives you any sort of reason to think that she's going to be disobedient or rebellious. And that's a command, right? Hey, she's doing something, apparently. Doesn't have to actually do anything, but something is giving you the impression that she might be rebellious against you, and here are the steps that you need to take. Notice that's a command, right? That's a command, just like, hey, if this person leaves Islam, chop his head off. That's a command. And so I'm sure you have guys who think that it is their religious obligation to beat their wives.
Oh, no doubt about it. They have to. How could they not? It's the perfect word of Allah. Okay, so we go from there to kinetic, actual violent jihad. You may have seen the video out of Belgium, out of Brussels, of a van plowing, driving onto a terrace, plowing into a bunch of people who were out eating lunch. 6 people were injured. Interesting thing, what do you think the guy's name was? His first name? Just take a guess. I know there's billions of first names in the world, but what do you think the guy's first name was?
Okay, he says go with Muhammad.
Muhammad. Now, I never would have thought. I would have thought, Bill or Joe or Fred, but Muhammad is correct, actually. And there were witnesses.
This guy's good.
He is. He's almost as good as Backpack. Now,
we should have the Backpack in one of these.
Backpack, why would somebody do something like this? Yeah,
Backpack, magic backpack.
That's a good idea. Anyway, there were witnesses who said that he was yelling something, Muhammad, as he drove into this crowded area and injured people with his van. What do you think he might have been yelling?
I don't even need to phone a guy for this one, because I asked him about the last one. He said Allahu Akbar.
I thought you were going to go with Workers of the World Unite, or I don't know. Make America Great Again. But anyway.
I'd be a millionaire on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
You would be. It would be huge. Oh, I love that. Who's on the phone? Was it Jibril? Anyway, yes.
It was Zucker Night.
Zucker Night. What's weird about this story is that in the original stories, the first reports, it said witnesses said he was screaming Allahu Akbar. And then that vanished from all the reports. And the one that I was able to snag was from NOS, which is a Belgian news source, translated it from Dutch, and it said, the newspaper HLN previously reported that other witnesses said the suspect shouted Allahu Akbar, but that has since been removed from the coverage. So they actually say that in the report. Now, why do you think it was removed from the coverage, David? Do you think it's because the witnesses retracted their saying and said, no, we have a false impression, he did not actually scream Allahu Akbar?
I would guess that either they were contacted by people with a certain political bent, or by Muslim organizations and said, hey, if you report what this guy said, it's going to lead to an anti-Muslim backlash, and therefore take those details out.
That's it, man. It's everywhere. Meanwhile, in Germany, always a rich vein of jihad activity, we have a man, his name was Mustafa. Jumped out of a bush, grabbed a little boy, 6 years old, tried to run off with the kid. He is a migrant from Syria, and he was shouting that it was his son, but there was a commotion, police were alerted, and he finally put the boy down and fled. However, the same man came up to a guy, another adult actually in this case, and he said, according to this individual, he said he attacked me aggressively and wanted to kill me as an infidel, and he kept shouting something. I have to ask you, what do you think? Once again, what could he possibly have been shouting?
Black Angel over in the comments suggests that he may have been shouting, "This MAGA country."
That's right. That's what he was shouting. This is MAGA country. No, actually, I'm sorry to say he was shouting Allahu Akbar. He said he wanted to kill him as an infidel. And in any case, he is now in psychiatric care. Because as we all know, this is only, it is and could only be a manifestation of mental illness. There's nothing else it could possibly be.
And what's weird is you can see how the social workers and mental health professionals and things like that could actually justify locking people up like that, right? These people coming, hey, I've been commanded by God to slaughter people. I've been commanded by God, and my religion commands me, but they don't believe the religion teaches that, so it comes across as delusional, right? All these professionals have been trained for decades to believe, no, Islam just promotes peace and tolerance. So if someone's somehow seeing, someone's seeing, hey, slaughter the infidels and slaughter your family or slaughter, unbelievers in the name of Allah, whatever they're seeing, it's not there. And so it's delusional. They've got mental health problems. They need to be institutionalized.
They are so programmed to think that Islam is entirely benign that when we
could flip that. Right? We can flip that. Yeah. Hey, if you're not seeing this stuff, then you're delusional, right? All you politicians, and you all need to be institutionalized because it's right there in front of your faces. And then, just as surely as, if I say, hey, there's no laptop in front of me right now, there must be something wrong with me because there's obviously a laptop. Well, if you read Fight Those Who Do Not Believe in Allah and you say, nope, that's peace and tolerance, there's something wrong with you, right? You're delusional.
Yep. No doubt about it. Another one out of France, you may have seen the video. Crowded train car. It's just packed with people. It must be subway, but it's above ground. It's the L. And it's just packed. And it's stopped. It's just sitting there on the tracks. And there's this one guy, and he's outside the car on the tracks. And he's picking up stone after stone and throwing them at the train car. And what is he yelling, David?
Gosh.
Chocolate is better than vanilla?
Well, MAGA country didn't work. I'll go with Allahu Akbar.
Yeah. Oh, I got to admit, it's Allahu Akbar. And what's strange is that the train is just sitting there. There are all these people on the platform, and they are just standing there and watching. And I guess this is sort of a daily occurrence in France nowadays. And here's a guy who's really acting nuts. He's acting clearly mentally ill, but he's screaming this. Nobody wants to do a thing because he might get more violent. And their police are nowhere in sight. It was a strange glimpse into what France is like now. And there's just no telling. How long was the train sitting there? What ultimately happened to the guy? No report. He's just standing there and screaming Allahu Akbar and chucking stone after stone after stone at this train.
They probably gave him a medal of heroism in France. But it is disturbing to think that these things become so commonplace, like they become ordinary. I was reading. Someone sent me an advertisement for a new train being constructed in I think it's northern India, but it was listing all the awesome features of this train, and one of the features was that it's stone proof. you can't
Yep.
you can't throw a rock through the window. They're actually making it so you can't throw rocks through the windows because that's become such a normal thing.
You got to have that because, well, because there's so many dumb infidels around. And that leads us to our dumb infidels section of the week. We had a German newspaper, Tag Zeitung, the Daily News, which is a left-leaning green newspaper. And after the attack on Salman Rushdie and the attempt on Masih Alinejad, you remember that the Masih Alinejad, the very famous and courageous Iranian dissident, was first the subject of a kidnap plot from the Islamic Republic. And then more recently, there was a gentleman outside her home for a couple of days, camped out in his car with an AK-47 and $1 million in cash. And it seems as if it was another attempt, to kidnap or kill her, as he was an Azeri, and there is a sizable Azeri population in Iran. Now, anyway, after these incidents, this German paper says, is it right that Masih Alinejad criticizes the hijab, the forced hijab in Iran? And is it right that Salman Rushdie wrote this book that criticizes Islam or blasphemes in the view of Khomeini? And Julia Neumann, the author of this article, a specialist in social justice, she said, no, it was damn dangerous. She said she's not worried about the Iranian women who are beaten and imprisoned for not wearing the hijab. She says it's racist and encourages white supremacy to say that women should have a right in Iran not to wear the hijab, and that it's also racist and encouraging white supremacy to say that the Salman Rushdie should have a right to make fun of this incident from the traditions of Muhammad. It's a racist, white supremacist thing to stand in any way against the encroachment of Sharia.
So just to be clear, the Iranian women who don't want to wear the hijab and are sort of in a public conflict with the religious leaders and the rest of the public who are Iranian, who are telling them, no, you have to wear the hijab or we'll, lock you up or beat you or something. The Iranian women who don't want to wear the hijab are racist against Iranians. And I guess Salman Rushdie is a white supremacist, the Indian white supremacist, from a sort of liberal Muslim background family. But as soon as he criticized it, he became a white supremacist. Now, just think about how insane this is, right? Because you've got the people with power in Iran are treating these women who don't want to wear the hijab really, really terribly, right? And it is hard for them. It is hard for the women in that context to get freedom. Their only real chance at freedom is if they also have outside support. And yet, if you support them from outside and even let them know, hey, we support your freedom to choose, your body, your choice. Nope, you're racist. So keep your mouth shut and let these women get locked up, raped, executed, all kinds of things in the name of tolerance.
That's it, man. And then we have Salon magazine, right here in the old USA, which had a story just the other day telling us that Islamophobia is worse than ever. They thought it was going to end with Trump being gone, you see. But the Biden administration, they said, has not led to any significant reduction in Islamophobia. But the only example that they gave was this T-shirt that I do think was in poor taste. I don't think there's any justification for a T-shirt like this, and I'm not even sure how it's Islamophobic. But it was making fun of the Afghans who were clinging to the outsides of airplanes and fell off to their deaths while the American troops were leaving Kabul in August 2021. And so, yeah, I think that's a lousy T-shirt, but I don't see how that's an indication of some rise in Islamophobia. What they notably did not have was anything corresponding to stories like many more that I've got here about jihad attacks around the world. There are no Islamophobic attacks of that kind. Meanwhile, however, there was an international news story that originated in Australia in news.com and then was picked up by the New York Post about an incident of Islamophobia on a train in Sydney, Australia. It wasn't an Islamophobe standing outside the train and throwing stones at it while shouting, "This is MAGA country." It was an Islamophobe inside the train. And he was apparently drunk or stoned or schizophrenic or who knows what. But he's berating this Muslim woman, and he's speaking about Islam in disparaging terms. And only 16 paragraphs down in the story do you get the detail that he's speaking Arabic because he's a Lebanese Christian. Now, Lebanese Christians during the Lebanese Civil War suffered terribly and were subjected to really horrific persecution by the Muslims. Now, I'm not justifying this guy. He was obviously a lout, obviously a very rude person. But I think here we are told that there's this rising tide of Islamophobia, and it's international news that there's an incident of Islamophobia, and it's a guy yelling rude things on a train. Meanwhile, I got story after story here that we haven't even gotten to yet. You know, stories that just freeze the blood of 80,000 people displaced in Mozambique by jihadis, 40 murdered in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a guy trying to set up a jihad training center in New Mexico, a guy plotting a jihad attack, a mass murder, mass casualty attack in New York City. There's nothing like that, and yet we never hear about jihad the way we hear about Islamophobia.
And using the method that that journalists use, you could pick out anything and saying that it's the new epidemic, it's the new huge problem. Because if you're talking about like the United States, a nation of hundreds of millions of people, you can always find someone who believes something and then zero in on that person or on the other 8 people who agree with him and just keep showing them over and over and over again. You see. And if that's all you're bombarded with every time you turn on CNN, you think, oh my goodness, it's the biggest problem in the world. It's the biggest problem there is. And likewise, if you ignore 14 centuries of relentless jihad trying to subjugate you, and the people who are promoting it today, very, very popular Muslim dawagandists and so on, openly promoting executing ex-Muslims and planning and plotting to violently subjugate the entire world a few decades from now and so on. If you just ignore that, yeah, there's no problem here. Just imagine if they, I mean, I'm even if they didn't like do what they do and zero in on something they want to establish as part of their narrative. Even if they didn't want to do that, if they just like honestly put these stories out, the ones that you're talking about that they never cover, but they can't, because as soon as they start reporting this stuff, you're encouraging Islamophobia, and that's the biggest problem in the world. Because look, that guy on the train, what the heck?
Yeah.
And the T-shirt. What about the T-shirt? I mean, the guy had a T-shirt on. You understand? He had a T-shirt. You understand? The T-shirt.
He should have had a tie, David. A tie.
Yeah. had a T-shirt on, my goodness. And you guys are sitting here worrying about all the people slaughtering people in the name of Allah? My goodness, man, a T-shirt.
Yeah, it's racist and bigoted to care about the people in Nigeria. You know, in Nigeria, I got here a quote that I wanted to give us before we go. A gentleman who is working in Nigeria with a peace organization, he said, "We are dealing here with a sustained campaign to wipe out Christianity in general and the Catholic Church in particular. No Christian is safe." Now, imagine what the outcry would be if you could say with any kind of justification anywhere in the world, and justifiably, if you could say no Muslim is safe in this area. The whole world would be aghast. But you're never going to hear about this. And yet there's it's really a genocide going on in Nigeria. It doesn't fit the narrative, so it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you could have, and someone might want to do this who's watching. I mean, you could have a program just like this that just talks about Nigeria, and you'd have enough material every week to talk about with the genocide that's going on there.
That's right. Do you see this from Apostate Prophet? Who is that weirdo with the Star Trek shirt?
Is that the dude who started rocking a man bun? Maybe he came over my house and he had a man bun. He's talking about a Star Trek shirt.
Wow, you guys you need to invest in some ties and jackets. But anyway, all right, we just got a few minutes here. Let's see what we can do. I got... Oh, we already did that. Excuse me. Oh, Austria. In Austria, there was a young Muslim migrant, an Algerian, who molested 2 young women. And he was sentenced to 8 months in prison and sex therapy. And this is, here again, you know, these people, they don't have any idea what they're dealing with. The sex therapy is not going to deal with the Islamic principles that led him to do with this, because they don't even know it exists.
And even, you know, no matter what they know when they're putting these programs together, you know, it's the same thing as like the counter-radicalization, the de-radicalization programs in prison, which, you know, Muslims who've been through them say they're a joke, right?
Yes.
They're a total joke, because here's what we're telling you versus what you've been taught all your life by your imam and your friends and so on. And why are you going to listen to this person?
Now we're going to tell you the true peaceful Islam that your imam doesn't know anything about.
And we're going to tell you that contrary to what Allah and Muhammad say, you're not allowed to go around molesting non-Muslim women and girls.
That's right. And so it's no surprise in light of this general denial and willful ignorance, we have a story out of the U.S. State Department. It actually it's somewhat of a surprise. There was the terrible story a few months ago of the student in Sokoto in Nigeria, Deborah Samuel Yakubu, who was murdered by Muslims, set on fire, as we've already had a couple of stories of women being set on fire already this week. She was set on fire after complaining to her Muslim classmates that they were using a school bulletin board for dawah, and she asked them to stop because it wasn't for dawah, it was for school announcements. And they accused her of blasphemy and murdered her. Now, the U.S. State Department actually honored her and put up a picture on August 22nd, the International Day commemorating the victims of violence based on religion or belief. That was actually a day. And they said, in May, a mob brutally stoned, flogged, and burned to death college student Deborah Samuel in Nigeria in an attack fueled by hatred and blasphemy allegations, even as authorities attempted to stop it. We honor her life as we continue to work to end such vicious violence. But of course, they don't dare say what exactly she was accused of blaspheming, who the people were who killed her. They're talking about religious violence as if it could break out equally in any community. And this is the kind of denial and willful ignorance that only is going to make sure there are more victims like Deborah Samuel Yakubu.
Yep. I have to say, every generation that says we need to look the other way and leave this to the next generation has blood on their hands for the blood that is shed from that next generation. Because, guys, any generation could deal with this. Any generation that wants to actually stand up and expose this fake prophet and this stupid book could get it done. It's easy. There is endless material there to expose this guy as a false prophet. Any generation could do it. Instead, every generation, we just want to look the other way.
Yep. And so they don't have to look as far every generation because it gets closer and closer and closer. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another fantastic, thrilling hour of This Week in Jihad. Oh, let me deal with that just real quick. Where did it go? There it is. I used to be an advisor to the FBI. I regularly met with FBI and military personnel from 2005 to 2010. And then the Council on American Islamic Relations and Muslim advocates wrote naming me by name, demanding. They wrote to John Brennan, who was in the Department of Homeland Security, demanding that I be fired and that all materials mentioning Islam at all be removed from counterterror training, and they were. And ever since then, the government's been in complete denial about this issue. Anyway, yes, sir.
Oh, I just wanted to say, and so now, and so, and let me guess, the recommended solution. All these people who are critical of jihad and critical of terrorism and who know the sources and who know what happened in 14 centuries of Islam and who know what all these groups teach and who know what's in the Muslim sources, they need to be silenced and can't be advocating to people who actually go out and do anything about these terrorist attacks. But those people need to be replaced by Muslim organizations like CARE, who will do the appropriate training and show that none of this has anything to do with Islam.
It's even worse than that also, David, because the replacement program was countering violent extremism. And last year, the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism, which is the counter-terror organization of all the social media giants, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, etc., they classified me as a violent extremist. Now, I've never advocated violence, never justified violence, never called for violence, but it's clear that what they want to do is silence everyone who speaks honestly about this issue. So eventually they're going to come for me, but if I'm still here next week, we will likely be here next week as well with more jihad. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, David Wood. And until next week, that was This Week in Jihad.